Even in our secular law today, for example, we distinguish between manslaughter and first-degree murder, just as the Mosaic law does. If anyone strikes someone a fatal blow with an iron object, that person is a murderer. The murderer is to be put to death. Or if anyone is holding a stone and strikes someone a fatal blow with it, that person is a murderer. The murderer is to be put to death. Or if anyone is holding a wooden object and strikes someone a fatal blow with it, that person is a murderer. The murderer is to be put to death. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death. When the avenger comes upon the murderer, the avenger shall put the murderer to death. If anyone with malice aforethought shoves another, or throws something at them intentionally so that they die, or if out of enmity one person hits another with their fist so that the other dies, that person is to be put to death. That person is a murderer. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death when they meet. But if without enmity someone suddenly pushes another, or throws something at them unintentionally, or, without seeing them, drops on them a stone heavy enough to kill them, and they die, then since that other person was not an enemy, and no harm was intended, the assembly must judge between the accused and the avenger of blood according to these regulations. The assembly must protect the one accused of murder from the avenger of blood, and send the accused back to the city of refuge to which they fled. The accused must stay there until the death of the high priest, who was anointed with the holy oil. Numbers chapter 35, verse 16 through 25. When considering God's command to the Israelites to destroy all the inhabitants living in Canaan as they go in to occupy the land, we may ask, was this righteous and justified? First, God was very serious about this. Saul, after all, was rejected from being king over Israel because of his refusal to obey God's command on exactly this point in relation to the Amalekites, 1 Samuel 15. Saul put his own sense of things before that of the Lord, and suffered the consequences. In the same context where God commands the destruction of idolaters among Israel, the same standard he uses for these idolatrous peoples, God also commands the Israelites not to oppress aliens and foreigners. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord must be destroyed. Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. Exodus chapter 22, verse 20 and 21. Clearly, those who are not of Israel but who embrace the God of Israel, choosing to live among the Israelites, and worship the one true God, are blessed along with Israel. But those of Israel who reject him are condemned along with the nations whose every action rejects him. The reasoning behind our Lord's commands to destroy the peoples of Canaan is very clear. Failure to do so would be a snare of such terrible proportions that many in Israel would be led into idolatry and away from the Lord, and so would be condemned for all eternity along with those who seduced them. For they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods, and the Lord's anger will burn against you and will quickly destroy you. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 4. So that the result of failing to comply with God's command might have meant a few short years for these corrupted peoples, but it would also have meant condemnation for those otherwise not condemned. God always in his mercy looks ahead where we cannot see and works things out for our protection and salvation, just as he did in this instance for his people, Israel. From the purely human point of view, we see people suffering and are moved. God understands the hearts of all, however, and knows very well who is going to choose for him and his son, and who is not. In his great grace and mercy, he is not going to allow the reprobate to drag the elect down with them into condemnation. God is in the role here of one who intervenes to prevent the destruction of an innocent person's free will, and that is his ultimate purpose, just as in the example where we would be justified in stopping an attempted murder by equally deadly force. In fact, the Israelites were not as zealous about carrying out our Lord's commands in this respect as they should have been, and it cost them dearly. They did not destroy the peoples as the Lord commanded them, but they mingled with the nations and adopted their customs. They worshipped their idols, which became a snare to them. They sacrificed their sons and daughters to demons. They shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and daughters, whom they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan, and the land was desecrated by their blood. They defiled themselves by what they did, By their deeds they prostituted themselves. Psalm chapter 106, verse 34 through 39. Life is temporary, and what really counts is not the length or the quality of these few days we pass on this earth, but the eternal salvation and rewards to which we as Christians aspire. God gives all life, Acts chapter 17, verse 25, and as the giver of all life has the right to take it away as well. Indeed, all die in Adam as a result of his just judgment upon sin, and because of our universal sin, we will not endure forever in these bodies and on this earth. Therefore, whatever time we have is a gift from him, and in each and every human life the issue is our response to him and to his grace. There are many people, in fact the vast majority of mankind down through the ages, who are not at all interested in him and who have rejected him and his Son. Once this decision is forcefully and willfully made, the person in question is living on what amounts to borrowed time. It is only the grace of God that allows God's enemies by their own choice, for Jesus died for all, to continue in this world. As mere human beings, and particularly as followers of Jesus Christ, we respect all human life and do not undertake to end it lightly. We have this mode of behavior from our Lord himself. In this case, and in all other similar cases, past, present, or future, we ought to trust to his wisdom, mercy, and grace, and understand that he is Lord of all and can do whatever he pleases in this world he created. Without any question, all that he does is righteous and good, and could not be otherwise, Romans chapter 3, verse 4, so that if there is ever a question in our hearts, we must not lean to our own understanding, but give him who knows all the benefit of the doubt, especially since there is so much about time and circumstances that we will never know this side of eternity. I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. Romans chapter 9, verse 15. So life and death are in God's hands. He will at the end consign all unbelievers to the lake of fire. It is the very basis of the devil's charge against God to impugn his righteousness by claiming that such judgment is inconsistent with his love. But God has shown his love beyond all question in the sacrifice of his beloved Son, and offered a way out for all who are willing. So then, those who are condemned by the will of God are really only condemned based upon their own free will, misused to abuse the grace of God and reject his love. This was certainly the case of the people of Canaan to a very large degree. Never has there been a more idolatrous and anti-God, anti-good group of peoples, as can be seen from the subsequent conduct of those who were not destroyed. But remember, some did turn to God. Rahab was saved, and is in the lineage of our Lord Jesus Christ. The Gibeonites did go to great lengths to avoid the righteous destruction decreed against them, and like Nineveh of later times, found compassion and deliverance. So we see that on the one hand, all judgment, condemnation, and destruction that comes from the Lord is thoroughly just, and on the other hand, all who turn to him are saved and delivered by him in his great mercy, just as are you and I, who though we deserve to die, yet we have been saved through the love and mercy of our God and the sacrifice of our Lord Jesus Christ.